Please don't kill me, human. I'll warm your bed if I must, whispered the defeated alien warrior.
The world was cold and loud, even in silence. Jaren Thorne stood still, half-crouched behind the fractured hull of an armored crawler, rifle braced against his shoulder. The scorched wreckage still steamed from recent impact, its side torn open by an energy blast. He adjusted his position and scanned the field ahead. Scattered bodies, debris, and the remains of a forward operating post half buried in ash. Above him, the sky was dark orange, stained by thick clouds of smoke and static discharge. Another storm would roll through by nightfall. The weather on Valerix 6 never stayed calm for long. He exhaled slowly, checking his scanner one more time. The heat signature hadn't moved in 3 minutes, just a single soft ping beneath what looked like collapsed concrete and twisted alloy plating. Not a drone, not a power cell, a person. He didn't want to be here. This wasn't his war anymore. Jaren had been recon, former special forces, 7 years of raids and cleanup ops across 4 different colonies, most of them forgotten by the rest of the galaxy. Then the Illirax offensive. Then the fallout. Command stopped asking questions after he stopped taking orders. Now he was a civilian contractor, unarmed on paper, hired to recover bodies and extract salvageable intel from battlefields before the scavengers got there first. But war never left a place tidy. And sometimes, like now, something or someone still twitched among the rubble. He moved forward, rifle up, boot soles pressing lightly into the ash. The field stank of fuel and burned flesh. He stepped over a shredded corpse. Male, Varellan, rank tattoos still visible on the wrist, and entered the exposed side of the bunker. The walls inside had blackened from plasma fire. Cracks ran across the ceiling like a spiderweb. He swept his weapon in a slow arc. The heat signal was still ahead. He turned into a narrow access corridor, then stopped. Slumped against the inner wall, partially shielded by fallen debris, was a violet-skinned woman. Her chest rose in slow, shallow movements. She was alive. Her armor, if it could be called that, was ceremonial combat gear, mostly decorative. Black metal straps crisscrossed her torso, some bent or broken. Panels of sheer, dark fabric hung torn across her abdomen and thighs. One shoulder guard was missing entirely, exposing a gash along her collarbone. Her skin shimmered with grime, dried blood, and ash. Silver-white hair spilled across her chest and down her back, clumped and tangled. Jaren aimed. She didn't move. He inched closer, pausing just out of reach. Her hands were empty, open at her sides, but her eyes were alert, golden, vertical slit pupils tracking his every move. Her breathing was uneven. Her lower lip was split. She looked exhausted, cornered, ready to collapse, but unwilling to surrender. He saw it in her posture, tension in her shoulders, the quiet fight to stay upright. "Don't move," he said flatly. She didn't. "Are you armed?" She coughed once, a dry sound. Then she shook her head. Her voice came out rough and cracked. "No." Lost it during the breach. "What's your name?" A pause. Her throat flexed as she swallowed. Sharian Velketh. That name registered. She wasn't a grunt. Velketh had been tagged on multiple resistance cell reports. Former commander, Varellan Hexen hybrid, engineered for leadership and survivability. There'd been an order to kill on sight, but that was before the peace talks collapsed. He didn't lower his rifle. "You were in command?" "I was," she said, with a faint trace of bitterness. "Not anymore." Jaren's eyes moved across her wounds. Plasma burns on her left ribs. Deep bruising along her arms. A torn muscle in her thigh by the look of how she held her leg. She wasn't faking. "You're bleeding out," he said. "I know. I can stabilize you. If you stay still." Her head tilted slightly, suspicious. "Why would you help me?" "I don't want to leave a living body behind for the scavengers." A pause. Then she said it low, like it cost her something to offer it. "Please don't kill me. I'll do anything. I'll warm your bed if I must." She didn't sound seductive. She sounded trained, conditioned, like it was something she'd said before, maybe more than once. Jaren froze for a beat, then took one slow step forward and holstered his weapon. Her shoulders flinched anyway. He knelt beside her, keeping his movements clean and visible. He unzipped a compartment on his belt and took out a medfoam applicator. "I'm not interested in that," he said, voice clipped. "Stay still." He pressed the foam gently over her burn. She winced hard, groaning through her teeth. Her muscles jerked beneath his touch, but she didn't fight him. The smell of burnt skin mixed with sterilizing compound filled the corridor. "You're lucky you passed out before the infection set in," he said. She managed a dry laugh. "Still time." Jaren sealed the wound and bandaged her ribs. Then he looked her over again. She was barefoot, and her hands were trembling. "How long have you been here?" "Since the second blast," she said. "2 nights, maybe 3. You didn't call for evac?" "No signal. My comms were destroyed." Of course they were. No one from her side would have come even if they hadn't been. He stood and looked back toward the open corridor. His shuttle was grounded a kilometer south, stashed behind the remains of an old mining tower. Too far to risk carrying her in daylight, not with scavenger bands crawling the outer ridges. His field shelter was closer, up the incline, beneath a ruined comm spire. Temporary, but warm. He turned back. "Can you walk?" "No. I'll carry you." She stared at him, unblinking. "You don't even know me. I know you're not dead yet. That's enough for now." She didn't argue. He crouched and lifted her slowly, her body stiff in his arms. She was light, but not fragile. Muscle still lined her back and legs, even under the bruises. Her breathing was shallow against his neck. She didn't speak as he carried her out into the open. Her fingers clung weakly to the strap of his vest, more out of reflex than fear. The wind had picked up again. It dragged fine dust across the broken terrain, clinging to his boots and her hair. He moved fast, head low, posture controlled, navigating the ruined slope. The dead lay untouched, many already looted, stripped of weapons and supplies. Nothing about this world was sacred anymore. When they reached the shelter, he eased her inside and set her down on the floor near the portable heater. The walls of the structure were reinforced polysteel, just enough to block thermal scans. He sealed the hatch behind them. Inside, the air was dry and warm. A small lantern glowed dimly from a ceiling. He moved quietly, setting out a water canister, food rations, and the second sleeping pad. Sharian remained where he left her, back against the wall, watching. "Here," he said, holding the canteen. Her hand trembled as she took it. Water spilled across her chin. She didn't apologize. "Don't expect thanks," she muttered. "Didn't ask for it." She looked down. "You don't want what I offered?" "No." "Then what do you want?" Jaren leaned back against the far wall, arms folded across his chest. "For you to stay alive. And quiet. Until the scavengers clear out." She stared for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Her expression changed slightly, a touch less guarded. She lay down on the mat, wrapping the emergency blanket over herself. She looked smaller now. The blood had dried across her neck. Her eyes closed, and for a few seconds, she simply breathed. Before sleep took her, she whispered, not to him, not to herself, just out loud, "Don't leave me alone out there again." Jaren didn't respond, but he didn't sleep either. He sat by the door with his rifle across his lap, listening to the wind scream outside. Eyes open, pulse steady, because somewhere out there, the war was still watching. And something in him had shifted. Not strategy, not mercy, something closer to obligation, something dangerously human. He didn't know her, but he wasn't going to leave her behind. Not again. Sharian woke to warmth. Not soft, not safe, just warmer than ash-covered steel and fractured stone. Her eyes opened slowly. The room around her was dim and industrial. Steel wall plating, a small radiant heater, a portable power core humming in the corner. No restraints. No cold hands reaching for her throat. Just the human, sitting against the opposite wall, silent, eyes open, watching. He hadn't left. Her heart skipped, a twitch of disbelief she quickly masked. She shifted slightly under the thermal blanket. The wound along her ribs stung where he'd sealed it, but the bleeding had stopped. She felt weak, dried out, but she was alive. Jaren sat motionless, a ration bar half unwrapped in one hand, untouched. You didn't sleep, she said, voice rasped. Didn't need to, he replied. She glanced at the door. It was sealed, reinforced. A field shelter, not military grade, but shielded enough to block thermals and pulses. Still, the thought of being locked in with him pulled at something in her chest, reflexive fear. Habit. You're not going to report me? Jaren didn't look up. To who? That caught her off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Right. There was no chain of command anymore. Not for her. Not for him. He finally took a bite from the ration bar. Command pulled out last cycle. Most of this sector's abandoned. What's left are looters, bounty hunters, cleanup crews. And you. Scavenger contract, he said, chewing. I mark bodies. Extract data chips. Turn in confirmed IDs for credits. Low risk. Low respect. Gets me by. Until you found me. Jaren nodded once. Didn't expect a live target, he added. You were flagged, KOS. Kill on sight, she echoed quietly. Yeah, I read the same intel. Thought you might still follow it. He gave her a hard look. If I wanted you dead, I'd have let the storm finish the job. She sat up slightly, groaning from the pressure against her side. Her hand touched the bandage under the blanket. Fresh pain laced through her chest, but she gritted her teeth and held still. He watched her struggle, but didn't move to help. She didn't expect him to. You were special forces? She asked, testing him. Used to be, he said. Back when sides mattered. Why'd you stop? He didn't answer right away. Just stared past her at the cold steel wall. His jaw moved slightly tight. Because none of it meant anything in the end. Sharian didn't ask again. There was silence. Thick and uncomfortable. The heater clicked. Dust swirled in the light. Then she said, quieter this time, You didn't take what I offered. He met her gaze. Calm, unreadable. No, most men would have. I'm not most men. She held his eyes for a few seconds. Her own gaze narrowed. Not angry, but studying him. Not sure whether to believe him or fear him more. Why are you really helping me? She asked. Because I've seen what happens to women left behind, he said. And I'm not watching that again. There it was. The answer to a question she hadn't asked. You lost someone? She asked softly. He didn't answer, but something in his expression shifted, something too fast, too private to catch fully. She didn't press it. A warning alarm beeped from the portable scanner on the table. Jaren stood instantly and moved to check it. The display pulsed red. Movement, he muttered. Outer Ridge. Small group, moving west. She sat up straighter. Bounty team. Could be. Could be scavengers. Are they scanning? Not yet, but they're close. She clenched the blanket around her and leaned forward. If they find me, they won't, he said firmly. I'm not handing you over. Why? She demanded. You said this wasn't your war. He turned to face her. It's not, but I still have a line I won't cross. Sharian stared at him, throat tight. Her heart pounded faster than it should have. Her whole life had taught her that people lied when they said things like that. Kindness always came with a price tag. Jaren was already packing. He threw his gear back into his field bag with smooth, efficient movements. We move at dusk, he said. I've got an old drone path that'll take us through the Ridge Canyon. Harder to track. Can I even walk? You're going to try. He looked over. And I'll carry you when you can't. She blinked. You'll slow down. I've had worse burdens. The words hit harder than she expected. She looked down. Her hands were dirty, bandaged, shaking faintly. She had been a commander once. She gave orders. Now she was limping behind a stranger, kept alive by the man she'd been raised to hate. It didn't make sense. Nothing did. But she knew survival, and he wasn't lying. They spent the rest of the day in silence. Jaren calibrated the scanner and charged his pulse shield. Sharian rested, dozing on and off, her body aching. He gave her a stim shot to keep her mobile once they left. When the sky darkened, they moved. He wrapped her in a worn cloak and slung her arm across his shoulders. She tried to walk. She made it 7 steps before her legs folded. He caught her. She muttered something sharp under her breath. What was that? He asked. I said, don't be gentle. I'm not. And he wasn't. He moved fast and quiet, keeping them in shadows, using every contour of the broken ground for cover. They passed the ridge line just as the trackers circled the far basin. Jaren held her close beneath a camo cloak while spotlights swept over the horizon. She didn't breathe for 30 full seconds. Neither did he. They weren't seen. When they reached the drone tunnel, half collapsed and long abandoned, he set her down inside, his back to the entrance, his hand never leaving his weapon. She exhaled shakily. Her pulse hammered her neck. "You know," she whispered, "you're risking your contract by helping me." "I know." She leaned her head back against the wall, closed her eyes, then said quietly, "I'm not used to this." "To what?" "Someone choosing not to own me." Jaren didn't answer, but he didn't move away. And as she drifted into sleep again, she felt the first sliver of something unfamiliar slide into her chest. It wasn't trust, but it was close. Sharian woke to the sound of rain, sharp, metallic drops tapping against the ruined structure overhead. Not real rain, not water. On Valerix 6, it was always ashfall mixed with atmospheric coolant discharge. It stung if it touched skin, left white streaks on dark metal, and turned soil into sludge. She blinked slowly, eyes adjusting to the faint glow from Jaren's portable lamp. They were still in the tunnel, huddled deep inside where the walls had held. He was sitting near the entrance again, silent, still, rifle across his lap. One hand rested on the grip, the other clenched loosely against his thigh. He hadn't slept. Again. "Are you always like this?" she asked, voice low but clear. "Like what?" "Watchful. Guarded. Miserable." He glanced back, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're still breathing, aren't you?" Sharian pushed herself upright slowly, wincing as her ribs stretched. Her muscles were tight, and her thighs still burned, but her head was clearer. She hadn't felt this lucid in days. Maybe longer. "I need to piss," she said plainly. Jaren pointed to the left end of the tunnel. Drain pipe 2 meters in. "It's dry." She dragged herself to her feet and limped away without help, not because she didn't need it, but because she refused to ask. Behind her, Jaren didn't move, but she could feel him keeping track of every footstep. When she returned, she sat again across from him, wrapping the cloak tighter around her shoulders. "I've been thinking," she said. "If you'd left me where I was, someone else would have found me." "Probably," Jaren replied. "Then you'd be dead. Or worse." "Why'd you really stop?" "The military, I mean." Jaren was quiet for a long moment. "Tell me the truth," she added. "Not the version you give contractors." He leaned back slightly against the rusted bulkhead, jaw tense. Then he finally spoke, slow and deliberate. "I followed an order that got 6 civilians killed. Thought we were clearing an arms depot. It was a refugee holding point. Bad intel. Bad timing. No apologies from command." She didn't interrupt. "They called it collateral. I called it the end." Sharian stared at him. His voice hadn't changed. No tremble, no anger. Just a flat weight behind every word. Something unhealed. She understood that. "I was born for war," she said quietly. "My father was Hexencast. Strategist. My mother was Varellan. Diplomatic breeding line. I was spliced for command efficiency. I didn't even have a name until I passed my first kill trial." "Sharian," he repeated. "Is it your real name?" "It's the one I earned. Closest thing I have to a choice." She studied him again. He didn't look at her like others had. Not like prey, not like salvage, not like a threat to be snuffed out. More like a puzzle. Outside, the ashfall thickened. The wind howled faintly through cracks in the tunnel, bringing with it the scent of ozone and scorched stone. "You have family back home?" she asked, testing. "No." "Anyone waiting for you?" Jaren shook his head. That stopped being part of the plan a long time ago. She didn't push. It wasn't her place. But there was something else she needed to know. "Back in shelter," she said slowly, "when I offered myself, did you think I'm in it?" His eyes met hers, sharp and steady. "No." She swallowed hard. "I didn't want it to be real either," she admitted. "But I said it because I thought it would keep me alive." "It did," he said simply, "but not for the reason you think." Silence stretched between them. He reached into his gear and pulled out a ration bar, broke it in half, and offered her a piece. She took it, ate slowly, Then she asked the question she hadn't dared to ask earlier. Are you planning to keep me with you? Or just until I can walk on my own? Jaren didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, until you're safe. That's not the same as free. No, it's not. She stared at him. I need to know you're not going to sell me. I'm not, he said. But I can't promise someone won't try to take you. She nodded once. That was fair. He stood and walked to the edge of the tunnel, peeked out through a narrow slit. Clear for now, he said. We move east next. Abandoned comm station near the basin. Might still have a working transmitter. You're planning to call for help? I'm planning to find out who else is alive. She pulled herself upright again, legs trembling but holding. And me, you stay with me. A pause. Then he added, unless you want to take your chances alone. She stepped forward slowly and for the first time stood beside him instead of behind him. No, she said firmly. I don't. They moved at nightfall again. This time, Sharian walked most of the way. Jaren stayed close, but didn't touch unless she stumbled. When she did, he caught her without comment and helped her back up. No glances, no words, just presence. They passed through broken structures, burnt-out gun nests, a crashed transport still sparking in its ribs. She paused once to watch a tracker drone drift silently across the horizon, its lights scanning low. Jaren pulled her back behind a wreck and pressed a finger to his lips. She didn't breathe. When the drone vanished, she whispered, if they catch us, they won't. How do you know? I'm still here. That answer, absurdly simple, shut her up. Later, they found shelter beneath a collapsed skybridge. The rain hadn't reached inside. He rolled out the mats again, offered water. She drank, her fingers brushing his for just a second, accidental but charged. He looked at her. You don't owe me anything, he said. I know. She paused. But I might still give it. She lay down then, facing away, but her voice was soft, barely audible. Not because I was told to, not because I'm scared, just because I want to feel human again. Jaren didn't speak. But when he turned off the lamp, he didn't go far. He lay just close enough for her to hear his breath, steady and real in the dark. And for the first time since her cell fell, Sharian didn't dream of death. The temperature dropped before dawn. Sharian stirred beneath the thermal sheet, her breath catching briefly as a sharp chill crept along her spine. She reached instinctively toward the warmth she'd sensed near her earlier, but Jaren was gone. She pushed herself upright quickly, heart kicking in her throat. Her side ached, her thigh muscles tensed, but the pain was distant compared to the sudden cold wash of anxiety. The shelter was dark, lit only by the ambient glow from the ash-choked sky outside. The makeshift barricade near the tunnel entrance had been pushed open, just enough for someone to slip out without making noise. She scanned the corner where he'd lain. His gear was still there. His rifle was gone. Panic coiled in her gut. She forced herself up, hissing quietly through her teeth, and reached for the field cloak. Every instinct told her not to follow. Stay put, stay hidden, but her legs were already moving. She stepped outside. The air hit her like frost. Valeric's excess storms dragged down the temperature just before first light. Her bare feet sank into the half-frozen sludge. She ignored it. She kept her body low, moved from one piece of collapsed structure to the next, following the faintest trail of disturbed ash. Then she heard it. A voice. Sharp. Male. Speaking in clipped, military tones, accented, not native Union. Still warm. We've got movement here. Then Jaren's voice. Calm, cold. Flat. You've got 30 seconds to lower your weapon and walk away. Sharian crouched behind a broken crate and peered through the gap. Jaren stood at the edge of a clearing, rifle braced. Across from him, two scavenger scouts in light armor flanked an old cargo hauler, one aiming a modified stun launcher, the other holding a pulse pistol pointed low but ready. The man holding the stun launcher laughed. You bluffing, old man? Jaren didn't move. Try me. Sharian scanned the angles. He was outnumbered but not outgunned. Still, one wrong move, and it wouldn't matter. These weren't military men. They wouldn't take prisoners. The one with the pistol stepped forward slightly. We're tracking a Varellan signature. Someone alive. You've been flagged in the region. Could be bounty-worthy. Maybe you're harboring. I'm not harboring, Jaren said flatly. I'm protecting what's mine. Sharian flinched. The man tilted his head. Yours, huh? Back off, Jaren growled. I don't sell people. There was a pause. Tension crackled. Sharian knew this would go bad in seconds. She reached for a shard of broken rebar beside her. Her fingers closed around it. She stood slowly. Stepped forward. The scouts turned. They saw her. Her legs barely held her upright, but she didn't stop. Her voice was low and steady. You want me? Take me. But leave him. Jaren's head snapped to her. Sharian, no. The lead scout raised his stun launcher and fired. Jaren moved before the shot landed. He dove sideways, firing twice in tight succession. One bolt hit the scout with the pistol in the hip. The second caught the stun gun just as it discharged. It exploded in the scout's hands, flaring white-hot and throwing him to the ground. The other man screamed, grabbing at the burning metal embedded in his chest. Jaren rolled to his feet, grabbed Sharian's arm, and dragged her backward toward the tunnel. Gunfire tore through the air behind them. A single bolt seared past her head, close enough to burn her cheek. She stumbled. He caught her again, shoved her behind the broken barricade. Inside the tunnel, he slammed the door panel shut and braced it with a steel rod. Then he turned on her, furious. What the hell were you thinking? Sharian stared back, panting. You didn't have to stand there alone. I told you to stay hidden. I'm not a burden. I'm not cargo. And you're not the only one allowed to make choices. His jaw clenched. He paced, breathing hard, checking the scanner on his wrist. The red pulse blinked, then faded. They're gone, she asked. Dead or retreating, he said. Either way, they're not dumb enough to stay in proximity after a weapon fire alert. They both stood there silent. The air between them thick with heat, adrenaline, and something else, raw and unspoken. Finally, he moved closer. His voice dropped. You could have died. So could you. I've done worse, he muttered. So have I. He looked at her again, longer this time. You were scared, she said, softer now. He didn't deny it. I've seen what they do to Varellan women. So have I. Another beat passed. Then she added, You called me yours. Jaren's throat flexed. It was the only way they'd hesitate. She nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. But you didn't say it like that. He didn't answer. Didn't move away, either. Sharian stepped closer, breath still fast from the run. She stopped barely a meter from him. You're not like the others, she said. I didn't believe that at first. But I do now. You shouldn't. I already did. Her hand lifted, hesitant, uncertain, and lightly touched the side of his face. His stubble was rough, jaw tense beneath her fingers. He didn't pull away. I'm not offering because I'm scared this time, she said. He didn't move. I want to feel like I'm still someone, she whispered. He took a breath, deep, sharp, then reached up and gently removed her hand from his face, holding it between his own. His voice was rough but controlled. Then I won't take you like this. Not yet. She didn't recoil. She looked down at their joined hands. I'm not asking to be owned, she said. I just don't want to be forgotten again. You won't be, he said. Outside, the wind howled harder, stripping more ash across the valley. But inside, they sat side by side in the dark, their fingers still touching, and the silence wasn't empty. It was waiting, and neither of them wanted to leave. Jaren slept lightly, back against the tunnel wall, rifle laid across his lap, one boot still laced. It wasn't real sleep, just measured stillness, eyes half-lidded, listening for movement beneath the wind. Valeric's 6 didn't allow real rest. It allowed intervals. Sharian hadn't closed her eyes all night. She sat beside him, arms wrapped around her knees, chin resting against folded arms. The adrenaline from the ambush had faded, but something new lingered, an ache behind her ribs, deep and quiet, like the feeling you get after being caught crying alone. She didn't know what to do with it. Outside, the wind thinned. The storm had passed. Pale morning light filtered through the cracks above, casting a faint silver glow across the tunnel floor. Her skin, still bruised and scraped, shimmered slightly in the light. She hated that shimmer. It had been bred into her, bioluminescence for battlefield intimidation, tribal markings to honor victory. But now it just made her easier to see, easier to chase. Jaren stirred. She didn't turn a look. "I know you're awake," he said. "I didn't sleep. Because of him?" She shook her head slowly. "Because of me." His eyes stayed on her, quiet and sharp. "What does that mean?" "I haven't had a choice in anything for a long time," she said. "Now that I finally do, I don't know how to use it." Jaren nodded, slowly. "You don't have to decide everything at once." She gave a dry, quiet laugh. "You think I'm trying to? I think you've been trying to survive so long. You forgot what it's like to want something instead of needing it." She turned her head now, met his eyes. "I want to stay with you," she said simply. "Not just because it's safer, because I feel real again when I'm near you." He didn't blink. "You know how dangerous that is, right?" She nodded. "I know, but I'm tired of feeling nothing." Jaren stood then, slowly. His joints cracked softly as he rose to full height, his frame casting a long shadow across her. She watched him, uncertain, but didn't flinch. He walked to the edge of the tunnel and pulled aside the camouflage netting. Sunlight, if it could be called that, glimmered through the ash-lace sky. The surface was quiet. "Today's a travel day," he said. "Long stretch. We crossed the basin and reached the relay tower. If it's still intact, I'll send a pulse. Not for rescue, just to see who's still out there." She stood, wobbling for a second before steadying herself. "What if someone picks it up?" she asked. "Then we hide," he said. "Or fight." They moved together. She carried her own gear this time, lighter than his, but still weight enough to force sweat to her brow by the second hour of walking. The landscape changed slowly as they climbed out of the collapsed highway tunnels and descended into the basin. Ruined mechs frozen mid-fall, shattered helmets buried in red dust, carbon-scored ground where skirmishes had flared and died. No bodies anymore, just shadows. About halfway down the slope, Sharian faltered. She dropped to one knee, panting. Her vision flickered. Jaren was at her side in seconds. "Sit," he ordered. "Now!" She didn't argue. Her breath came in shallow pulls. Her pulse beat hard at her neck. Jaren pulled a hydration vial from his pack, snapped the seal, and pressed it to her lips. She drank. Fast. Greedy. Water ran down her chin and on her collarbone. "I'm fine," she said, catching her breath. "You're not," he replied, "and you don't need to pretend." Her eyes flicked up to his, then down. Her hands curled into the loose fabric of her travel cloak. "I used to be stronger than this." "You still are," he said. "You're just healing." She nodded, slowly. When she stood again, she let her hand rest on his arm a second longer than necessary. By late afternoon, they reached the comm relay. The structure leaned to one side, half collapsed, but the core antenna was still powered, weakly. Jaren pulled back a rusted panel and connected his wrist pad to the uplink. Sharian stood behind him, watching. Her hands trembled, not from exhaustion this time. "Will you tell them about me?" Jaren glanced back. "No." She swallowed. "But what if someone comes for you?" she said. "Another contract. Another price." He stared at the screen. "Let them come." The message pinged. A basic survival beacon with no metadata. Just a pulse. Alive. Signal clean. No threat tags. Jaren disconnected. Shut the panel. "Signal's out." "No reply," he said. "For now." They made camp beneath the dish platform that night. The wind had died completely. It was the quietest it had been since she'd woken in the bunker days ago. She removed the outer layers of her cloak and sat on the ground beside him, legs folded beneath her. The thin, sleeveless underwrap clung to her skin, stained and dust-streaked. Her tribal runes glowed faintly in the dark. She didn't try to hide them anymore. "You keep your distance," she said. "I do. Is it because of what I offered?" He shook his head. "It's because I don't want to be another man who took something you didn't mean to give." She studied him. Long. Silent. Then she said, "What if I offer again? This time because I want to. Because I choose to." He didn't speak at first. Then he leaned closer, voice low, serious. "Then I'll believe you. But not tonight. Not while we're still running." She nodded. "Just once." Then she moved closer, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she whispered. You never should have been, he replied. She lay down beside him, not touching, not asking, just near. And for the first time, Jaren allowed himself to close his eyes. Not all the way, but enough. And that night, they both slept without waking. Not as fugitives, not as enemies, just two people who hadn't been held in a long time, learning slowly how to reach. The storm broke without warning. It rolled over the basin at midday, sweeping in from the southern ridge in a massive wall of smoke and static. The sky turned violet gray, clouds pulsing with electromagnetic flashes. The comm relay behind them sparked and died in a sudden, audible snap, its thin reserve power overloaded. The last connection to anyone else gone. Jaren grabbed his gear and tossed the pack toward Sharian. Move. Now. They sprinted, not fast, not clean, but with hard, focused purpose. Sharian's leg buckled once on the slope. Jaren caught her without slowing, one arm braced beneath her ribs, lifting her over a broken pipe. They ducked into the ruins of an old armored vehicle bunker. Metal frame still mostly intact, half of it sunk into the ground. The moment they were inside, the wind slammed into the outer walls like a wave. Dust spiraled through cracks. Static charges burst across the ceiling panels in slow, hissing arcs. They crouched together, breathless in the dark. Sharian's voice came low. That wasn't natural. Jaren nodded grimly. Directed Stormfront. Someone triggered it. Why? To flush out survivors, he said. You send a storm like this, you drive anyone hiding into the open. And then... He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Outside, something rumbled. Heavy boots, slow tread. They both froze. Jaren eased toward the broken wall and looked through a crack in the steel. Two figures. Not scavengers this time. Full exo-armor. Military tags stripped. No insignia. Bounty hunters. They were sweeping in pairs. Slow, methodical. One carried a plasma scanner. The other had a short-barreled flechette cannon, a weapon used not for capturing, but for finishing. They weren't here to ask questions. Sharian touched Jaren's sleeve. If they catch me, they won't. If they do, she said, you run. That's not a request. Jaren turned to her. I'm not leaving. You don't even know what I'm worth to them. I don't care. She reached up suddenly and grabbed his face, fingers digging into his stubble. Her eyes locked onto his, no longer afraid, no longer ashamed. Just real. You are not dying because of me, she said. You hear me? His breath caught in his throat. Then something cracked in him, hard and silent. He grabbed her wrist, lowered it gently, but didn't let go. We don't split, he said. Not anymore. Outside, the footsteps grew louder. Jaren turned, flicked a small charge beacon from his belt, and tossed it across the ground toward the comm relay. It landed 30 meters away and blinked blue. The hunters spotted it. Moved. He grabbed Sharian's hand. Run. They broke from cover just as the cannon barked. Explosive darts shredded the bunker's edge. Jaren threw her forward behind the next structure, an old command crawler, before diving after her. One bolt seared across his arm. He bit down hard, didn't scream. Sharian pulled him up with all the strength she had left. Blood streaked down his sleeve. She pressed her palm against the wound, her own fingers trembling. You're hit. I've had worse. She looked at him, really looked, and then kissed him. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was sharp and desperate and full of fire. It was everything she hadn't been allowed to feel for years, all poured into one breathless, wordless decision. He didn't pull away. He kissed her back, like the world outside didn't matter, like the only thing real was her mouth, her body pressed against him, the heat of her skin against his. Then he pulled away, eyes fierce. This isn't the end. No, she said, voice low. It's the beginning. She helped him stand. Together, they moved, faster now, in sync, ducking into shadows, sliding behind rusted vehicles, vaulting over collapsed terrain. His injuries slowed him, but she supported him. It wasn't clean. It wasn't beautiful, but it was survival. They lost the hunters 2 hours later in the canyon, a narrow drop filled with thermal vents and chemical mist. They dropped into a shaft used for old coolant runoff, sealing the door behind them with scrap and a welded bracket. Inside was silence. Real silence. They collapsed against the wall, lungs burning. Jaren leaned his head back, blood soaking through his sleeve. Sharian knelt beside him, checking the wound. You need stitching. Antibiotics. He grunted. In the pack. She pulled it open, found the sealants and surgical thread. Her hands were steady now, focused. As she worked, her thigh brushed his. His skin twitched under her touch. You're lucky, she murmured. I'd say the same. She paused, looking at him. Then, slowly, with purpose, she set the medkit aside and climbed into his lap, one knee on either side of his legs, her hands on his chest. I'm not offering any more, she whispered. I'm asking. He stared at her, open, wounded, real. You sure? Yes. He reached up, wounded hand trembling, and brushed her cheek, drawing her down into him. And in that hidden corner of a ruined world, with blood drying on his arm and dust streaking her hair, she made love for the first time in her life, not out of obedience, not out of fear, but because she chose to. Every breath, every touch, every sound they made was theirs. Claimed. Earned. Later, she curled against his chest, skin to skin beneath the emergency cloak, her fingers tracing the edge of his dog tag. We lived, she whispered. He kissed her temple. We're not done yet. She nodded. But now, we're not running alone. Outside, the storm faded. The world didn't change. But they did. 3 days later, the basin was quiet. The bounty hunters never returned. Maybe the storm fried their sensors. Maybe they marked Jaren and Sharian as dead. Maybe, just maybe, they realized the cost of chasing ghosts through a poison canyon wasn't worth a paycheck. Either way, the pursuit ended. But the journey didn't. Jaren moved slower now. The wound on his arm had closed, but his muscles were stiff, range limited. Sharian helped him walk in silence, her arm always near his back, her pace always steady. She didn't flinch from his weight. She didn't ask if he was okay. She knew he wasn't, and he knew she didn't need comforting lies. Their destination was an old civilian relay hub, buried beneath the eastern cliffs of the basin wall. Before the war, it had processed atmospheric scans and remote drone data. Now it was derelict, but powered barely. Jaren had passed through it once during a recon op years ago. It had water, it had heat, and it was forgotten. That made it perfect. By midday, they reached the entrance. The biometric locks were fried, but Jaren bypassed them with a coil link and an old field code. The door groaned open, revealing a corridor choked with dust and emergency lights still pulsing orange. They stepped inside. For the first time in weeks, they didn't have to look over their shoulders. Sharian stood in the threshold, silent. Her hair, once matted, was clean now, pulled back in a tight wrap at her nape. Her skin, still bruised in places, bore healing lines where old scars used to sting. The glowing tribal runes down her spine were faint now, as if even her body was letting go of who she used to be. She turned to Jaren. You sure this place is dead? He nodded. Checked the scans. No movement in 5 cycles. Abandoned. Like us. Then it fits. They moved inside, sealed the hatch, and began to clean. Not for tactical reasons. Not survival. For themselves. They cleared dust from sleeping quarters, patched the power flow from the solar collector, scavenged emergency protein packs, and water filtration tabs from the storage lockers. They worked without talking much, trading tools, gestures, half-smiles. The kind of silence only possible between people who trust each other without needing to say it every 5 minutes. That night, the air was still. They lay on a real bed, 1 mattress, 2 thin sheets, both wrapped in the same emergency blanket. Sharian's head rested on Jaren's chest, her breath slow, fingers tracing the old scar beneath his ribs. You want to know what they called me? She asked suddenly. He looked down. Go ahead. Velketh wasn't my family name. It was a war name. Means silent blade in Hexan dialect. They gave it to me after I killed my first officer. He didn't react. He didn't need to. I didn't even hate him, she said. He gave the wrong order. I followed protocol. I thought that made me strong. She looked up now. I was wrong. He touched her face, slow, with his fingers curled gently beneath her jaw. You're not that person anymore. I don't know who I am now. You don't have to. Not tonight. She smiled softly. A tired smile, but real. Then, quieter. Do you want me to stay? Jaren's jaw tensed. He sat up a little, turning fully toward her. Look at me. She did. I'm not a rescuer. I'm not a hero. I've killed people I shouldn't have. I've made choices I'll never fix. Her hand touched his, interlacing their fingers. You didn't rescue me, she said. You saw me. A long silence. Then Jaren whispered, stay. She kissed him again, slower this time. No fire, no panic. Just warmth and skin and breath shared between two people who had run out of lies. They made love again that night. Not for survival. Not from fear. Because they had both chosen each other. And nothing was more dangerous or more sacred than that. Morning came with sunlight filtering through the cracked upper vents. The station was warm. Still. Safe. Sharian woke first. She sat on the edge of the bed, bare feet resting on cold floor panels. She looked at the room, clean now, organized, and thought about how far she'd come. Jaren stirred behind her. She looked back over her shoulder. You planning to stay in bed all day? She asked, arching an eyebrow. His voice was gravel. If it means waking up next to you, maybe... She smirked. You're getting soft. No, he said, standing and wrapping his arms around her from behind. I'm just not scared anymore. She turned and kissed him on the cheek. Then she said the words she'd never thought she'd get to say. No more running. This is home now. His reply was quiet. Then we build it together. They stood there for a long moment, just holding on. And outside the sealed walls of the old relay station, the world kept spinning. The storms would come again. So would the hunters, the chaos, the noise. But not here. Not now. Here, a warrior and a soldier had stopped being weapons. They were people again, and they had chosen to live. Together. It had been 12 days since the last shot was fired. 12 days without footsteps in the distance, without drones overhead, without the taste of ash in their mouths. The basin had gone still. The relay station held. And slowly, so slowly it almost frightened them, they began to live. Jaren had repaired the solar relays, restoring basic lighting and warm water. Sharian had repurposed old storage containers into shelving and hung torn field blankets as room dividers. The station had become theirs. Not a shelter, a home. That morning, the sky outside was pale blue-gray. No clouds, no smoke, just light. Jaren stood shirtless by the workbench, sun hitting the scars on his back. He was trimming old wiring into usable pieces, sleeves of his pants rolled up, boots off, relaxed for the first time in weeks. Sharian walked in wearing only a soft, gray utility wrap tied at her waist, bare feet silent against the floor, her long silver-white hair hanging freely over her shoulders. Her violet skin caught the warm light spilling through the open ceiling vent. She had never looked more at ease, or more dangerous. She leaned on the doorway, arms crossed. You always look this serious when fixing dead wires. He glanced back, only when someone stares at me like they're choosing where to bite. Sharian raised an eyebrow. I'm just admiring the view. He smirked. And here I thought you were shy. I'm not shy anymore, she said, stepping forward, voice low. You helped with that. They shared lunch quietly. She sat beside him on the floor with her legs stretched across his lap. He fed her a spoonful of rehydrated fruit, and she fed him the next without a word. The way their eyes lingered on each other said enough. Later, she wandered outside to stretch in the sun. The wind was mild, the air clean enough to breathe without a mask. Jaren watched her through the open hatch. Every curve of her body, every movement she made, measured and graceful, spoke of a warrior who had finally put down her blade. She turned and caught him looking. You watching me again? Every time I get the chance. She came back to him slowly, hips swaying in a way that wasn't performative. It was honest. She wanted to be seen now, and he saw her entirely. As night fell, the station grew dim. They turned off the overheads to conserve energy. Just the glow of an old lantern lit the room. Jaren was lying on the bedroll, shirt off, arms folded under his head. Sharian approached, wearing only a thin cloth that barely reached mid-thigh, the fabric loose and shifting with each step. She stopped beside him and looked down. "Move over," she said. He did. She climbed onto the bed, straddling his waist, hands planted firmly on his chest. "I don't want to ask tonight," she whispered. "I want to take." Jaren's hands found her hips. "Then take what you need." She leaned down, kissed him, slow, open-mouthed, tasting him like she never had before. Her fingers traced the scar on his abdomen, then lower. She took her time. There was no rush anymore. No fear. Their clothes disappeared piece by piece, tossed aside with care and heat. Every touch was deliberate. Every sound unfiltered. Jaren let her set the pace. She moved like she knew exactly what she wanted, every roll of her hips, every soft exhale against his neck. She led, and he followed. Then they switched, again and again. At one point, she whispered against his skin, "You make me feel alive." "You are alive," he said, breathless. "You're everything." When she finally collapsed on top of him, slick with sweat and shaking with the echo of release, they didn't speak for a long time. They just held each other in the dark, heartbeats sinking, chests rising together. After a while, Sharian whispered, "Do you think we'll be found again?" "Maybe," Jaren replied. "But we're not afraid this time." She nodded. "Good, because I'm not running anymore." And that night, with the cold wind brushing the sealed windows and the stars breaking through the ash, they slept entangled, naked, unguarded, warm. Not warriors, not fugitives, just man and woman, just theirs.